When it comes to determining the power of characters, there are a few major levels of power that are considered integral. The first major hurdle is becoming planetary, being able to destroy the floating space rock that houses entire civilizations and blast entire ecosystems into the vacuum of space. Of course, there's also destroying stars, solar systems, or even galaxies. But the idea of a character having universal power is always considered uniquely impressive, because that means they possess the ability to wipe out reality itself. When I first started power scaling Asta back in 2018, I scaled him above mountain level characters, and postulated that he likely reached island or country level ranges. If you had told me then that one day I'd be saying Asta was universal, I would be shocked, just like most of you will be shocked at the title and contents of this video. But if you actually look at all the evidence and analyze it without bias, Asta has very likely reached these levels of power, and he's likely been this strong for years. I already know what a lot of you are thinking. Broku, you're just going to be using Glamour World. Well, yeah, I'm going to be using evidence. Glamour World is good evidence for it. It's really the bad misconceptions about Glamour World, typically by random TikTokers or forum posters with questionable knowledge on the series who muddy the water on Glamour World. But please stick with me for this one, as there are several pieces of evidence that imply Asta is universal besides Glamour World, as well as arguments about Glamour World that you have not even thought to consider. Now, before we get into any of the scaling, I'm going to use my monozone key sensing to predict that you're going to say that Asta is not universal because he uses anti-magic attacks. Well, one, even if this was true, that would still mean that he'd be able to negate universal powers in other power systems that are similar to magic or mana. And for two, it is stated in chapter 4 of the series that Asta's anti-magic only negates the magic, not the force it produces. That means that whenever Asta does negate the force of magic, that's with his raw power. Remember that anti-magic is an energy force too. So yes, Asta scales to the force of the magic he destroys. There are at least 3 major misconceptions about Glamour World that I see parroted around the internet to the point where I just cannot stand it anymore. If you see anyone postulating bullshit about Dorothy's spell, send them this video. The 3 major misconceptions about Glamour World are as follows. Dorothy does not create Glamour World. Glamour World isn't even real, so there would be no scaling for it, and it's actually not infinite in size. The first misconception that Dorothy did not create Glamour World so that she just teleports people there is something that I find understandable, as she does literally teleport people there, but that doesn't mean that she does not create it. Sally, one of the most knowledgeable and credible characters in the entire series, literally says that Reeve, the elven version of Dorothy, created Glamour World right after she saw her activate the spell. Not only this, but in the profiles of the volumes, it says that Dorothy makes the Glamour World. It also says that the Glamour World is her world and she controls the entire space. If it's her world, then it's likely that she created it. One of the easiest ways to support these statements is that Glamour World is destroyed numerous times. It is destroyed in the Elf Saga, Yami destroyed it, and Morris destroyed it. You can also argue that Reeve taking over Dorothy's body actually destroyed the spell too, which is why she would need to reactivate it again to recreate it. Because we actually know that Dorothy doesn't need to cast the spell if it's already formed. She can just send her magic and teleport things or people inside. Despite all these times it was destroyed, it has come back. Shortly after Reeve's defeat, Dorothy brings Noelle into Glamour World. Dorothy uses Glamour World on Morris after Yami destroys it, and then just minutes after Morris destroys it, Dorothy has already recreated it and was ready to bring Lucifero into it. People do try and state that the Glamour World just naturally recreates itself, but there is literally zero evidence for that, and it blatantly contradicts the statements that say Dorothy creates it. Misconception 1, debunked. The second misconception is a lot simpler to debunk. Glamour World, it's not real, it's just dreams, so it's unscalable. Wrong. After Sally analyzes the world, she says that what Dorothy creates is literally the real thing. When she creates water, it is real water that chemically works with fire and lightning the way real water would. Since Glamour World is literally called a space, that would mean it's actually a real space. Glamour World is real. Misconception 2, debunked. The third and final misconception is that Glamour World is not infinite, even though it relies on absurd interpretations for that. In chapter 184, Luck, who at the time is known for being the greatest at mana sensing in the whole series, says that Glamour World has no border and it's endless, which people say that Luck is just being hyperbolic and that it's a knowledge claim that he cannot sense infinity. Well, there are examples of characters with lesser sensing than Luck performing crazy feats. Finral was able to sense Patri's infinite mana, whereas Henry could actually sense the magic inside a different dimension entirely. People bring up quote-unquote anti-feats for Luck sensing, like in the dungeon when he didn't immediately know that there were others there. What this completely leaves out is that Luck has 2 forms of sensing, passive sensing and focus sensing. Just like how if you focus your eyes or ears, you can hear or see better when you focus them. But not only that, this is literally Luck from Chapter 11, who would be nothing in comparison to the Luck who sensed Glamour World. Also, this debunk completely leaves out that the space of the dungeon was being warped to make it harder for Luck to sense. There are other examples of Luck being off-guarded, like when came up on him in the Elf arc. The issue is that Luck is off-guard, and he's mid-fight. This would be like saying that because Dragon Ball characters can get off-guarded means that they cannot have multiversal range when it comes to their key sensing. The funniest thing is that Luck doesn't even need to be proven to have this range because Reeve affirms Luck's statement anyway. After Luck says that Glamour World is infinite in size, Magna claims that it is impossible. Luck says it's more possible than Magna being dumb. And then Reeve comes in and says that the impossible is possible in Glamour World, directly replying and then affirming that Glamour World is infinite in size. There is so much cope around these statements, like people arguing that she's somehow referring to these plants she's making. Yeah, plant magic. That's so impossible. Binding magic is so impossible even though Magna can do it. Even though Reeve literally refers to the space itself here in Glamour World right before saying it. People try and argue that her claim is contradicted because the Glamour World collapses from the weight or volume of finite dreams, which is absolutely not what happened. The idea that Glamour World could not physically fit the dreams is debunked just by looking at the manga panels. We can visibly see that there's a lot of space left, and this is just the space at their level, not even including the space above and below them. What's funny is that this actually supports that Dorothy scales to her creation. Now, if we look at the context, it says Glamour World cannot support the two dreams. In other translations, it actually says withstand. These words can be synonymous, but the context likely is that Glamour World isn't strong enough to withstand Dorothy and Reeve's fight. The statement from episode 151, which is canon to the manga, Dorothy says that she needs to get stronger to trap devils in her Glamour World. This would mean that Glamour World gets stronger when she does, as with any other mage with any of their spells. Dorothy creates an infinite space that can also get stronger along with her. But when you pair these two statements, what it means is that the dreams were so powerful, they actually destroyed Glamour World. Glamour World could not support or withstand the power of their dreams because it was not strong enough. But that would still mean that Reeve and Dorothy were fighting with the power to destroy an infinite space. There are other ways to look at it. Like it could be a rule or limit of Glamour World that only one dream user can use it at once. Since we know that Dorothy controls the entire realm, Dorothy and Reeve fighting for control over the entire infinite space could be what destroyed it. The idea that Glamour World couldn't support finite volume or finite weight is the least supported interpretation of the ones provided. It's like Goku versus Beerus. They had finite volume to themselves, finite weight to themselves, but the Dragon Ball macrocosm was not going to be strong enough to support their battle. Finally, we can actually see stars in Glamour World. Sure, we can only see them in the anime, but that's because Dorothy's sky isn't a night sky. It's a pink sky. It's actually hard to see the stars with the color in the anime, so it'd be near impossible to see in black and white manga. We can see stars in Dorothy's Glamour World in episode 151, which again is canon to the manga, as it is a Tabata supervised episode. The director of the anime specifically lists 151 as an episode that he worked with Tabata on. The stars that Dorothy creates look just like the stars in the sky in the anime, a bunch of dots with a few twinkles mixed in. People argue that Dorothy could just be creating twinkles or pseudo-stars, or people say that Dorothy would not be able to make stars that are real because she doesn't know what they're made of, but it's literally stated in the series that she cannot create what she doesn't know, like how she could not make sake for Yami, but obviously there are stars in the sky, so she probably knows what they are. And since we know that she creates the real things that she visualizes, and they look identical to the stars in her own night sky, they are like these stars, which would add evidence to Glamour World being like a universe. Glamour World is an infinite space. Now, a lot of people already accept what I'm saying. They just argue that Dorothy either doesn't scale to the Glamour World or that Glamour World is just an outlier. Here's why both of these arguments can be thrown out. There are different standards that a lot of people have, but I'll just go by the Versus Battle Wiki standard since y'all use that site to usually downplay the verse anyways and appeal to authority. And I do mostly think that their standards for creation feats and outliers are fine. The first standard for a creation feat we can already tick off because it just asks for evidence that the character is creating it and not just teleporting people there. I already proved that Dorothy creates Glamour World. The second is about starry skies, which I already provided justification for, but wouldn't need to anyways because we already know the size of the realm is infinite. The third standard requires a universal energy system to be used, which Dorothy uses mana. She also uses this mana to attack outside of just creating things, as we see her in the anime snap her fingers and eradicate a boulder that was being thrown at Charlotte. So we do know that Dorothy can and will attack with her raw energy. Finally, Dorothy fighting against Reeve and their clash, destroying Glamour World, acts as evidence that she can use her energy system on a similar level for destruction and power levels of that tier. The final requirement for creation feats to be accepted is to pass the Outlier standards, which it easily does. Let's go over the 5 standards. Pause and read the standards if you wish. I will merely be answering them to save time. Now, it's also accepted that you don't need to pass all 5 standards to not be considered an outlier, meaning if we can pass at least 4, then it's not an outlier. Number 1 is easily passed because this was her first feat as a character. This was her big reveal. Number 2 is also easily passed for the same reasons as number 1, but it passes inherently because it requires the event to have happened at least 3 times. Glamour World has been created on at least 4 to 5 occasions. For number 3, I would say that it passes because Deaht had teased Dorothy's abilities for years and only finally revealed them with Reeve. She's an apostle that is supposed to be stronger than Magic Knight captains and is considered an incredibly hard character to fight. Number 4, if you look at it from the perspective of the latest activation of Glamour World, it doesn't break established power scaling because that would make multiple high universal creation feats as well as a few destruction feats. Dorothy thinks a devil a bit stronger than Zagrid can destroy Glamour World. Zagrid is also stated to have unlimited power, which would be required for destroying an infinite space. Number 5, this does not break the narrative of the work, really, at all. What in the narrative would contradict this? The majority of the villains didn't want to cause widespread damage because their goal was to reclaim their land, not destroy the universe. Most of the good guys wouldn't want to destroy the universe because they live in it. Now, things get even more consistent if we take in the numerous statements of characters having infinite or endless power. Patri and Dante are stated to have infinite power. Zagrid is stated to have unlimited power. Both Lilith and Amar are stated to have endless power. Most of the time, these statements are treated as hyperbolic. But in this context, 4 of the characters with these infinite power statements all scale directly above Dorothy or Reeve, which actually makes these characters consistently high universal. As one of the most common complaints about Glamour World scaling or these infinite power statements are twofold. When you bring up Dorothy creating or scaling to Glamour World, everyone says that's nonsense because she would need infinite power to do so, even though she scales above base Patri, who has a statement of having infinite power. Same for the other 4. People say these statements are just hyperbolic, even though all 4 of them scale above Dorothy or Reeve, who can create an infinite space. Something that I did want to add in is that Reeve was going to create an infinite water attack. This implies not only that she has infinite power in Glamour World, but also that she interpreted Luck and Magnus' statements as them thinking that Glamour World was infinite, since she is now using these words again. So yeah, this is not an outlier. Glamour World has been created 5 times and destroyed several, and there are a lot of other power scaling implications for it, which we will now get into. So even if you want to try and argue that neither Dorothy nor Reeve scaled to the creation of their Glamour World, that's actually fine because there are a myriad of characters or spells that would inherently scale above Glamour World. We can start with the Ancient Spade Demon. Julius is watching it run rampant on the Clover Kingdom and effortlessly wipe through its strongest magic knights. Even a captain who has his power nullification spell amped by the rest of his squad, and it just walks right through it. While Asta is fighting the Ancient Demon, Julius thinks to himself and says that the Ancient Demon is so strong that it repels all spells in existence. Keep in mind that Julius is fully aware of Glamour World, yet directly puts the Ancient Demon above it. When Vanessa sees Lucifero, the King of Devils, emerge into the living world and defeat Devil Union Asta with no difficulty, she says that just by existing, he forces all of creation to its knees. All people, spells, and even fate. Vanessa is very familiar with Glamour World at this point as she already fought inside of it. What this means is that if Lucifero were in Glamour World, he'd likely pop or destroy the infinite space like a balloon. One of the characters that more blatantly scales above Glamour World is Conrad, as his compound form is literally just a combination of every spell that he has taken with the Imperial Sword, which we know has Dorothy's magic inside of it since the sword did absorb part of her magic and soul. Remember that one's spells are connected to the soul because the grimoire is bonded to the soul. That's where spells are stored. What this means is that what Conrad's form in the movie is every single spell he has fused together, meaning that Glamour World, an infinite space, is compressed into the form. This would mean that even Devil Arm Asta from the movie would scale above Glamour World for being able to defeat Conrad. Furthermore, Conrad's Doom Gate is a combination of every single spell he's taken, and is stronger than his compound form, but is defeated by Imperial Sword Asta. There is a function within the sword that uses up all of the power of the sword, which is what Asta used to defeat Conrad and save the world. We know for a fact that Dorothy had actually given her magic and soul to the sword. Remember that because the soul is bonded to the grimoire, and that is where all your spells are stored, it is likely that Glamour World is within the Imperial Sword. This is why Conrad was able to use Lumiere's light magic, because the spells were stored inside of the Imperial Sword. The sword doesn't just absorb magic, it spells as well. That means that Asta's slash that saved the world contained an infinite universe compressed inside of it. Lucifero implies that he was the strongest at 50% power, and Lucius, who has seen thousands of timelines, agrees, which puts Lucifero above Conrad and even Imperial Sword Asta. And Lucifero is nothing to an even base Asta now, because base Asta could damage a Paladin Lucius, whose base form is stronger than 100% Lucifero. The final feat that I will be mentioning is Yami's Dimension/Equinox that destroyed Glamour World. Again, this episode is explicitly stated to be made in collaboration with Tabata and his editor, so it is canon to the manga. But there is a lot of issues with how people argue this, that Dimension Slash is purely hacks. This is something that is greatly contradicted in the manga. Yes, Yami's Dimension Slash is hacks, but it also has a force behind it. The whole point of Yami's dark magic toolkit is that he can make it faster and stronger by pairing it with his sword and muscles and launching it out, which is what he does with Dimension Slash. When Yami fights Sharla, she says that the magnitude of her spell was far greater. Well, she said that Yami's attack still was able to halt the momentum of her spell and had the power to reach and damage her. Just because something is a hacks doesn't mean it doesn't have a force or attack potency to it. If Yami gave me his katana that was coated with Dimension Slash, and if I gently pressed it against a pizza pie, it would slice through like butter because the sword is cutting the space the pizza occupies. But if I activate a mana zone and increase my power and then swing the Dimension Slash katana as hard as I could, the force of my attack will obliterate the pizza. With that example in mind, we can look at Glamour World. If Yami wanted to just break out of Glamour World, a regular Dimension Slash would have sufficed, since it cuts space. But no, he needed to do a mana zone and use his stronger Dimension Slash Equinox. Yami's spell didn't just cut Glamour World, it destroyed it. The two halves of the space spiraled around the other, and even though Yami's cut was directed in front of him, the horizon behind him fractured and the world collapsed again. Even if we say that Yami's attack potency only made up for 1% of the slash, 1% of infinite power is still infinity. In the Spade Saga, Yami considers Death Thrust an attack of raw magic power and not hacks, and that's his strongest spell, which means that the force of Death Thrust is stronger than the force of Dimension Slash, and this is backed up because Dimension Slash did nothing to Dante's Singularity, even though Death Thrust did. Against Lucifero, Yami would again need to pass his limits to do a combo spell with Knock, in which his attack potency would be surpassed by True Devil Union Asta, who is currently weaker than Asta's current base power. Just remember that Dorothy thought she was not strong enough to BFR a devil stronger than Zagreid and trap it in her Glamour world. She had no idea of any abilities the devil had at this time, none that could signify it could break out with hacks, meaning that she anticipated that if she teleported the Spade Devil into Glamour world, the devil would destroy it with raw power. We know that she doesn't have to go on Glamour World herself, she can just teleport things in there, but she doesn't think she can even do that to the devil because it would just break out. The main Black Clover universe has been called many names. The databook refers to it as a universe. Multiple characters have called it the living world, human world, and it's even been referred to as the physical world. We also know that there is the underworld, also referred to as hell. It's its own dimension of time-space, since the five-headed dragon needed to warp space and time in order to connect the two dimensions together. The Shadow Palace is a space that acts as the border between the living world and hell. If we look at how these things are shown to us, it actually gets pretty interesting. When Dante tells us about the Tree of Qliphoth, he shows this image. This isn't a redraw of a typical Qliphoth diagram. This is literally ripped straight from Google and our one-to-one images. This is Robert Flood's depiction of the Tree of Life. The reason why Dante is showing it is because the Tree of Qliphoth shadows the Tree of Life, or the World Tree. In Robert Flood's beliefs of the Tree of Life and the Tree of Qliphoth, the Tree of Life supports the universe, whereas the Tree of Qliphoth supports the underworld, hell. What is interesting is that the Sephiroth is literally referring to the Sephiroth, which is mapped to the Tree of Life. We can see the diagrams that the Tree of Qliphoth is as big as hell itself, as the 7 layers of hell are all contained within the branches of the Qliphoth, and its brush encompasses the entire dimension. Considering this is how the cosmology is depicted in both Black Clover and in Robert Flood's beliefs, the living world and the Tree of Life, and the underworld and the Tree of Qliphoth are dark and light reflections of the other. This would mean that the Tree of Qliphoth is a literal world tree, a divine plant that is the size of the universe, which is pretty important considering that it is stated that Asta could probably destroy the Tree of Qliphoth by himself. Asta is believed to be able to destroy a tree that is the size of the universe. Even if you want to say that this has never happened, Asta still scales above it with true devil union, as Lucifero, even the weakest version of him, was so strong that he actually fused with the Tree of Qliphoth. Merging with objects is considered a feat because you'd need to be strong enough to do that. So Lucifero is strong enough to merge with a universal-sized tree. And then Asta with True Devil Union defeats 50% Lucifero and has only gotten far stronger after the 15-month time skip. Again, base Asta would whoop Lucifero, who merged with a universe-sized tree. There are some more lore tidbits that actually do imply universal scaling. They are up to interpretation, but I will still talk about them. It can be interpreted that devils are the progenitors of their element. An example of this would be the supreme cliff-off devil Megicula, who is the devil of curses. It is stated that all curses in the living world originated from Megicula. Megicula is then hailed as the parent of all curses. If it is true that supreme devils are the creator of their elements in the living world, that would mean that Beelzebub, the devil of space, would have created all of the space in the living world and created the space of an entire universe. That would also be considered a high universal feat at the very least. Furthermore, Charlotte states that Megicula's curses actually reshape the world itself. Now, the context is not referring to the planet, it's referring to the living world, as in the next panel it states that she's referring to a power from another dimension, another world. Negative mana that comes from the underworld. The final thing I want to talk about has to do with Asta facing against Dante, a mage who is stated to have infinite power. Now there are ways to look at this feat. Either Asta scales to high universal for damaging Dante, or if you want to say that Dante has infinite stamina but not infinite power, that still means that Asta shut off an infinite amount of energy with his anti-magic power. One thing I do want to address is that this video is mainly about attack potency. Asta has universal or high universal attack potency. Does that mean I think he can literally slice through an infinite universe? Well, it's actually possible. If he could destroy a universal-sized tree, what's stopping stronger versions of Asta from destroying an infinite universe? It's kind of like in Dragon Ball, they don't always destroy the universe every time they fight. But Goku sure as hell has low multiversal attack potency. To summarize, Dorothy does create Glamour World. It is a real space, and it is infinite. There is sufficient reason that she and others scale to it, and there are several characters stated to have infinite power, one weaker than her, and the other scaling above her. The last point I want to debunk is that characters running out of magic power means that they don't have infinite power, or characters getting stronger means they're not infinite. Just because you have infinite power does not mean you can run out. I mean, if you have infinite amount of power and then you use an infinite amount, that could mean that you run out of power. And the idea of characters with infinite power being weaker or stronger than the other, even though it's both infinities, it's silly to think that when in Dragon Ball characters have beyond infinite attack potency, but then they still use finite multipliers to get stronger. Again, people appeal to absurdity when Dorothy can create infinite worlds because that would require infinite power, even though she scales above Patri, who is stated to have infinite mana. Or that it's crazy that Dante has infinite power, even though he scales above Dorothy or Reeve, who create an infinite space. Now, with the video done, I did want to conclude in saying that it's completely okay if you disagree with the scaling. The reason why I made this video is basically a response to people who would downplay Black Clover and then upscale other series using the opposite logic. I love Taizai, but Seven Deadly Sins fans are notorious for this. Arthur will create some random space with us having no information of its size and claim he's universal. The Demon Lord and the Supreme Deity will make their realms off-screen, us having no idea the difficulty it took for them, nor how long it took, and all we know is that they are multi-solar system-sized realms because they have stars in it. Yet for some reason, people will believe that that verse is universal over Black Clover, even though we have a character who is stated to literally create an infinite space on screen multiple times and we see it, and it's actually not even hard for her to do. But as long as you believe that Black Clover is at least multi-continental, then we're good. There are 3 separate multi-continental feats in the Land of the Sun arc alone, and even the Fire Spirit vaporized an ocean that is multi-continental. But I would still consider that downplay overall, but at least you wouldn't be stuck with people still trying to scale Black Clover the way we did in 2018, and that island or small country level scaling garbage. Hope you guys did enjoy this video. Please let me know your thoughts down below. Comment, like, and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications, join my Discord, and follow me on Twitter. Also, you can become a member, get access to videos early, and get extra videos every single week. With that being said, I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Thank you for the support, and peace out.